We're recording. We do that even though we don't need. That's the whole purpose of Zencastr. That it sticks it up. We still clap. You got it. Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that a lot of people talk about that, but I'm interested. You say it's got to be for kind of like research. So I'm wondering, maybe pluck your brain about like what are other things that I think data scientists do things other than research. I think they can answer questions. I'm just like maybe a little unclear where you draw the line on what's research and what's not. I think that's fair. But what if you wrote the macro? I don't know. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's interesting. It seems like in some respects, it sounds like if we define it this way, the term data science was not a backlash, but a response to, I think in society, when you say someone's a scientist, they immediately jump to like beakers in a lab, in a wet lab setting when you talk about science. So I wonder if we see science much more broadly, but I think a lot of other people see science as much more of a narrow view of wet lab science in some respects. And that data science is saying like, hey, like, yeah, we're scientists, but like it's about data. So don't get your mind that I'm necessarily going to be working with a beaker, even though I have worked with beakers. Yeah, we talked in a previous episode kind of about how I thought in some respects that there was some self-selection bias in data science people, because kind of this field was, kind of emerging, and the people who jumped into it turned out to be the people who were comfortable kind of switching into this kind of unknown quantity. And it still seems like that's happening at the job level as well. It seems like that you have to be either comfortable living in this newly formed role where, you might be the first to go through your department in this role to get promoted. So that's always like it's always a scary, maybe not a scary thought, but always something where it's not assured, because then other faculty don't have like a template to say like, this is what this person looked like. They can get promoted. So it sounds like with these new emerging roles, there's a lot of opportunities, but you're saying that like there's not many templates that have gone through the process yet. Yeah. So I guess it makes sense. I guess from an academic perspective, I can understand why it kind of went the way it did, is because, creating a new department requires a lot of sign off from people. It requires money. Institutes require the same thing, but maybe not as much as the same. I don't know if there's I know there's policies and structure, but I don't know if there's actual requirements of a department within a school. So I can understand why some of these institutes sprung up, or reincorporation and trying to refold data science into a department versus creating its own. So I'm just saying I can understand why it went the way it did, but I agree. I don't believe I've seen anything that's really done it at the forefront and said like, we are making this as a core department in our school. So you said training like large classes in these mathematics things. So I do want to highlight, that Roger Peng, you, and Brian Caffo have created a specialization on Coursera that has taught many, many, many people. So do you want to maybe comment on how that started, or how the trajectory's been, or feedback from students, or whatever? So hold on, we'll splice that out. So Jeff, sorry, he didn't tell me before this, but Jeff said to call it cloud-based data science. So just to ask the same question. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that leads me into so it's interesting that it's on. No. So I was saying it's interesting because I have had some experience with this group in this project, and the fact that it's on a Chromebook was actually kind of interesting because it has a touch screen, whereas a lot of us work on a Mac or like a Linux machine or something like that, where we would say click run on like RStudio or something like that, and then I would naturally assume the student would go to the mouse, move it up to the run button, and then click it. Whereas they would, because a lot of them are a bit younger in the sense that they've worked on like touch phones their entire life. They just like literally click the screen and click run. So it's just interesting that like they have it's not just that they develop skills for like cloud-based things. I think when we talk to them, they operate within the cloud system completely different than I think I would. Yeah, so we're going to probably link in the show notes the cloud-based data science course on LeanPub, but is there, especially with hiring some of these individuals or getting involved doing the face-to-face stuff or getting involved with the project in any way, what would be the best way for anyone to go about that? Yeah. No, I think yours. Okay, so I'm gonna say maybe like two things. If I was at a dinner party, it's like, what did you do in the last week? So I would say, we have this academic data science podcast, which we're on right now, and so in order to keep this going and pay for some extra mics and stuff like that, we submitted a grant last week to an internal grant at Hopkins to see if they will fund this effort in any way. So that was a lot more academic, and then definitely something that is much more academic maybe than data science, even though that it's supposed to be kind of the reverse, is I submitted a grant. It was about processing data and how to process data. And I got something back I had never received before. I actually got a response back saying that they could not find an editor for the paper. So yeah. So that's understandable. Mine is like a how to process like head CAT scans, and it was a neuroimaging journal. So I would think that's not really outside the wheelhouse. Yeah. So their responses were, you can submit it to another journal, which is totally understandable, or would you recommend an editor? And I will not do that. I will not put colleagues or friends in that position, and I'll just go to a different journal. It was just strange. All right, so Jeff, yep. All right, yeah, yeah, it's Jeff's first podcast. All right, so in the show notes, we'll have a link to the data science jobs, the cloud-based data science, and this is not going on the podcast. And then the link to the blog post whenever we get it. Alrighty, thank you. Bye.